Hey, what's the deal? Miss your boy Tag from Pro Wrestling Tag, you know what I mean? As of this recording, it is 6:58 p.m., August 13th, 2026. But the upload time to this is 11:30 p.m. You know what I mean? And this is the last video of the day. You know what I mean? It's the last discussion of the day. And I want to bring up something very, very interesting that I think it was Alfred Acuna. Shout out to him. You know what I mean? I love his content. I think he has terrific, I think he has terrific fucking content. You know what I mean? He has, he runs, he runs a Twitter account called, Pro Wrestling Bits. That's his, that's his account and such, right? And, he tells the truth about, about AEW and, he exposes a lot of the bullshit about AEW, right? And he put up a very, very, very interesting poll, right? That I thought made a lot of sense. I think it was either on Twitter or on YouTube, one of the two, right? And I think this is Twitter that he put. It has to be Twitter. If it's not Twitter, it looks like it's Twitter, but fuck it, nonetheless, right? He put up a very, very, very interesting poll that, had me thinking. It really, really had me thinking. And, on there, on the poll, he puts biggest AEW fall off, right? And he had four prominent names that if you were to ask me, it's real hard to choose, like who had the biggest fall off, and I'm going to dissect every single one. And I think, and someone else also put a very interesting tweet as well. It coincides with, with this topic beautifully. So there's four names. God damn, she's gorgeous. There's four names, right? Some female across the street, like, God damn. There's four names for AEW, right? Britt Baker, Sammy Guevara, the Acclaimed, and Wardlow, right? Now, it's like that is a very, very, really great question. That's a really great question that is very hard to answer. Very hard. Because think about this, right? Britt Baker at one point was the head bitch in charge in AEW for that women's division. Clearly, right? Clearly. She tore that, that division was on her fucking shoulders, right? Sammy Guevara, right? One of the top stars at AEW at the time, right? Who was, who basically was, especially when AEW first started, right? He was one of the main cornerstones of that company. Plain and simple. The Acclaimed. What happened to the Acclaimed? Great tag team. Terrific fucking tag team. Right? Anthony Bowens and Max Caster, right? Max Caster who, great rapper and such, right? Great rapper and everything, right? But also can wrestle. Inspired by John Cena. And then Wardlow, right? AEW has, like I said, they have a big problem with booking big men, right? Wardlow, his size will make him into a fucking star. Completely. Right? All four of these individuals, right, is now in the shits in AEW. Right? Either they're not being shown, they're not being showcased, or they're not being used how they should be used. Right? And they're just in shit's creek. WWE would be crazy not to have all four on their roster. That'd be fucking dumb not to do that. Completely. You know what I mean? Because with WWE, WWE is gunning for AEW talent. And it's funny, right? As more AEW talent, come across, somebody else put up a very interesting post, right? If I could find it. Yeah. Because they were talking about Kofi and Austin Creed, right? I mean, listen, it's fucking stupid that they're gonna be tag teaming with with Swerve for, for bullshit ass trio championships that don't mean squat. You know what I'm saying? It don't mean jack shit. It doesn't mean nothing. Right? So it's basically a waste of fucking time. But someone put a tweet out, right? And you know what? I might put it here. Right? Someone said, unironically, WWE and AEW are going to end up swapping entire rosters. And that is beyond fucking true. Beyond true. So when you go back to, to the thing that I told you, right? It's not even a matter if, but when all four of those AEW acts wound up in WWE, right? You're never going to see Britt Baker in AEW again. That is a guarantee. You will never see the DMD back in AEW ever the fuck again, right? That's one, right? Wardlow. I don't think you're going to see Wardlow back in AEW either. I think he's done. I think he's legit done. Sammy Guevara, I think Sammy Guevara will definitely be, I think he's going to leave. Because remember, not too long ago, right? About the whole AEW profile thing and such, right? Remember that controversy? Remember that? And then you got Wardlow. Not Wardlow, the Acclaimed, right? Max Caster is a free agent, right? And you know who else they should have thrown in there? There's somebody else who should have been thrown in that list too. Where the fuck is Private Party? Where the fuck is Private Party? No, where the fuck is Private Party? Where the fuck is Isaiah Cassidy and Mark Quinn? Where the fuck are they at? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's another name on that list that, that fell off completely from AEW. And now, you're signing fucking, you got Kofi and Austin Creed. I mean, what the fuck are we doing? You know what I mean? What the fuck are we doing, bro? Like, you bring these motherfuckers in for what? For what? What the fuck you bringing these motherfuckers in for? If you got people like Private Party and others in that fucking company, right? The Acclaimed. It's a shame, bro. It's a shame. I don't give a fuck if people look at me like I'm crazy. They could suck my dick. Actually, the girl who went by me, who should look mad good, like, she could suck my dick. But yeah, like, what the fuck are we doing? Like, what the fuck are we doing? And somebody else also said something very interesting about Jon Moxley, right? Someone said, and I should make a separate video on this, about how they feel like, if Jon Moxley was to come back to WWE because he did everything he could in AEW, will he be a bigger deal like CM Punk and Cody Rhodes? I don't know. And also, speaking of which, people are once again complaining about Chris Jericho. People are complaining once again about Chris Jericho, right? Say, he should have retired 2 years ago and such. My man should have just took the retirement deal from WWE and just say, fuck it, and just move on with the rest of his career. But I thought this is a very interesting topic because, again, all four of these acts was at one point 7 years ago. I can't believe I'm saying this. 7 fucking years ago, right? The cornerstones of AEW, right? Now, you can't even find these motherfuckers weekly. Not on no fucking Collision. You know what I'm saying? That, it's like you might as well just put, a fucking milk crate with these motherfuckers' pictures on there. You know what I mean? Because the fuck they at, B? Where they at? You know what I'm saying? Like, they fell off completely. And then let me see. Now that I'm thinking about this, right? What happened to the Turbo Runners? Remember the Turbo Runners? What happened to them? Like, come on. Like, these motherfuckers still have Anthony Ogogo in their fucking roster still, bro. You remember Anthony Ogogo? Like, come on, man. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, I think all these people that, that fell off, right? I think these are Cody guys. You know what I mean? I think these are Cody guys. Shout out to Ricky Saints because he made the smart move by leaving that, that piece of shit company called AEW. Right? Ricky Starks left. He's like, fuck that. I'm not going to be there. For what? You know, like it's fucking ridiculous. It's ridiculous, you know. But anyway, that's just me calling truth. Y'all don't like it? Suck my nuts. Anyway, guys, I'm about to be out. I'ma holler at y'all. I'll see y'all mañana for some more wrestling news and opinions. I'ma check y'all. Peace.